Humankind is all about letting you create these wonderful what-if scenarios of human history. In this video, we'll dive deeper into the topics that make humankind unique: eras and cultures, cultural affinities, legacy traits, and emblematic units and districts. Humankind is separated into 6 different eras spanning human history: the ancient era, classical era, medieval era, early modern era, industrial era, and the contemporary era. We've already covered how to make it to the ancient era, so if you haven't yet, feel free to go back and watch the basics video for more info on that. Once you've gained 7 era stars within an era, except for the Neolithic, you'll be able to advance to the next. Before heading into the next era though, you'll be prompted to choose a new culture. Once you make your selection, your empire will become that culture at the start of the following turn, taking on all of its unique bonuses and traits. We'll talk about what that means right away. Every era contains a number of different cultures for you to choose from, all of which are associated with one of 7 different affinities. Cultures can either be agrarian, aesthetic, builder, expansionist, mercantile, militaristic, or scientific. Affinities determine the general gameplay orientation and usually define where a culture specializes. Affinities also come with 2 special abilities, one passive and one active. The ability changes with the affinity of the next culture you choose. For example, the ancient era Babylonians are a scientific culture. When you choose the Babylonians, you'll gain the collective mind's active ability, allowing you to convert your industry and money in a city into science. Their passive ability lets you research technologies from the classical era. Now, if you choose the Carthaginians in the classical era, you will lose the scientific ability and gain the merchant ability, because Carthage is a merchant culture. Each culture also has an associated legacy trait. Legacy traits are unique bonuses you gain from choosing a specific culture. No 2 cultures have the same legacy trait, and the bonus is something you'll want to consider when choosing a new culture. Unlike affinity abilities, you will hold on to each legacy trait you gain through the eras. By the contemporary era, you will have 6 different legacy traits, each providing different bonuses to your entire empire. Mixing and matching the different traits through the eras is part of the fun in finding a combination that works best for your playstyle. On top of affinity bonuses and legacy traits, each culture also has both an emblematic unit and emblematic district. Like legacy traits, these are unique to each culture. Your emblematic units may require some research to gain access to them and specific resources to create them. Be on the lookout for any technologies that give you access to units with a shining golden border like this one. You'll immediately gain access to emblematic districts when you choose a new culture. Emblematic units and districts work exactly like their standard counterparts. You'll queue them up in your cities. You'll place districts directly on the map and use up population and strategic resources to complete your units. The caveat is that you can only place one emblematic district per territory per culture. Just like other districts and units you can queue up in your city, hover over your emblematics to see what unique exploits and bonuses you'll receive from them. Finally, there is an exception to the topics we've mentioned in this video. When choosing a new culture, you have an additional option on top of the new cultures you are presented with. That is cultural transcendence. Cultural transcendence is when you transcend your current culture to the next era. If you've chosen the Babylonians in the ancient era, you will have the option to transcend and bring them into the classical era instead of choosing a new culture. If you want, you can keep doing this right up until the contemporary era. There are both drawbacks and benefits to doing so. The negative is that you will not gain a new legacy trait, emblematic unit, or emblematic district. You will retain the ones you had in the previous era. This means that you will not be able to take advantage of an extra trait and your emblematics may become obsolete faster. However, the main draw for transcendence is the fame bonus. The fame rewards you gain when you've transcended your culture are higher than if you choose a new culture. So you will rake in more fame than some of the other cultures that have traditionally advanced to another. We want to give you as many options as possible to play Humankind your way. Hopefully, this helps you do that.
Off we go.
In Humankind, your relationships with the other empires can be the difference between sweet victory and humiliating defeat. In this video, we'll cover the friendly parts of the diplomacy system, starting discussions, trade, treaties, and alliances. As you explore the map in Humankind, you may run into another empire at any point. When you do, you'll get a notification and the other empire's icon will appear in the top left corner of the screen, to the right of your empire info. Whenever you'd like to tend to your diplomatic relations with any of the empires, you can just select their icon here and you'll be taken directly to the diplomacy screen with that empire. Here, it looks like we've found the Zhou. Let's introduce ourselves. To do so, just hit their icon, then hit Introduce Yourself here. The other empires may also introduce themselves to you. While we're here, let's get to know this screen a little bit. Headlining your diplomacy screen is your diplomatic relations state. Once you've met the other empires, your relationship with them will be defined here. When you hover over your relationship status with another empire, you'll get an overview of the abilities that are available in this state. You'll also notice 4 different tabs near the top of the diplomacy screen. We won't get into the crisis tab in this video, so let's just focus on the other 3 for now. First up, the relations tab. Here you'll be able to declare war, which we'll talk about in the Best Enemies Forever video, and propose an alliance, which we'll get to right away. You can see an overview of your relation states and your opponent's relation states with the other empires. You can also hit this button here to see a summary of your relationship history with this opponent. The Trade tab is all about importing and exporting resources. You can purchase both strategic and luxury resources your opponent is collecting, and you can see which resources you are selling to them too. Hit this Export-Import toggle to view the relative trade routes on the map. To purchase a specific resource, hit the arrow next to the resource and hit Buy to see an overview of how much it'll cost you. Hit this button to confirm if you're prepared to pay them for it. You can also do so by selecting the icon right on the map. An important point to bring up here is that you're purchasing access to the resource, not stockpiling it. If you are purchasing 1 iron from another empire, you can build 5 constructibles that require 1 iron within the same turn. However, the option to purchase resources from another empire will be closed to you until you sign a trade treaty with them. This is where the Treaties tab comes into play. Treaties are additional accords that can be added onto a peace or alliance state, adding 1 or more diplomatic abilities on both sides of the relationship. Trade treaties affect your ability to trade luxury and strategic resources. Information sharing will allow you to share map information. Border policy affects your ability to travel through this empire's territory, and military accords affect your ability to skirmish with them. To propose a treaty, simply hit the one you'd like to enact. The other empire can accept, refuse, or counter the treaty.
Are you interested?
This sounds like a good deal. I'm not interested. Not at all. No.
So that is your choice.
If they choose to counter, you will have to pay the specified amount to enact it. If you don't want to make the payment, you can refuse the counter proposal.
No, thank you. Take your feeble proposal elsewhere.
I heard you.
Finally, to propose an alliance with another empire, hit Propose Alliance on the Relations tab. If they accept, you will open up new diplomatic abilities. These will favor closer cooperation between your empires. You will also unlock treaties that can strengthen the alliance and make information and resources more readily available to the other empire. Proposing these work exactly as standard treaties do. This is all just the beginning of the diplomacy system in Humankind. In the next video, we'll talk a little more about the more hostile side of your relationships with the other empires. We've covered how to play nice with the other cultures. Now, what about the other side of diplomacy? In this video, we're going to talk about attitude, grievances, war, and war support. Buckle up. To start, let's head back into the diplomacy screen. Up near the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a word that represents this empire's attitude toward you. An empire's attitude towards your empire is determined by many different things: how large your armies are, how well you're doing overall, your proximity to them, trade, grievances, treaties, skirmishes. Nearly everything you do influences how another empire feels about you. Attitude is a good indicator of where you stand with another empire. The more positively they feel about you, the more likely they are to cooperate with you. If they feel negatively about you, trouble may be a brewing. What kind of trouble? Well, now's the perfect time to talk about hostile relationships in humankind. Grievances represent crimes committed by another empire and provide an opportunity for you to renounce the violation or demand reparation. They can be used to either improve an empire's attitude toward you or justify a war against them.
You will pay or suffer.
Grievances can be found in the Crisis tab on the Diplomacy screen. When one appears, you'll have 10 turns to decide whether to demand reparations or renounce doing so. After that, it'll be renounced automatically. To make a decision, hit the grievance in question, then simply select your decision. Renouncing is a gesture of good faith, forgiving the other empire for their wrongdoing. Water under the bridge. You'll gain war support for renouncing, though, so it's more of a forgive but don't forget situation. We'll cover war support right away. Demands, on the other hand, are not so friendly. What you demand from the grievance entirely depends on what the grievance involves. Aggression grievances justify the demand for monetary compensation. Ideological grievances justify the demand for changes to the opposing side's civics. Intervention grievances justify the demand for changes to the opposing side's diplomatic relations. Religious grievances justify the demand for changes to the opposing side's state religion. And finally, border grievances justify the demand for territory. If you make a demand and the opposing empire refuses, things start to get a little spicy. You now have justification to start a war, which can also be done on the Relations tab. However, once you have 80 war support, you're able to declare a just war whether or not your demands have been refused.
Enough delay.
Keep in mind that you can initiate a surprise war at any time, assuming you have enough war support. But without the justification, this is seen as a barbaric act. You'll receive the traitor reputation badge, and the other empires will take note of this. Once war has been declared, armies can attack and bombard one another no matter where they are on the map. You can also move into the opposing side's territory, which normally requires the two empires to sign a treaty or playing as an expansionist empire. The war ends once one side has either accepted or forced the other's surrender, and a comparison between the two sides' war support defines the reparations the loser will have to pay the winner. So what is war support? War support represents your empire's overall morale and animosity toward another. It is measured by this bar here on the diplomacy screen and spans from 0 to 100. You gain and lose support through many different means: winning and losing skirmishes, new grievances, demands both empires have made, etc. Hover over the war support bar to see how much you are gaining or losing and why on any given turn. Once either empire's war support has hit 0, the war is over and the losing side must agree to whatever surrender terms the winner suggests. Surrender terms at the end of a war depend on how the war played out. If you won by the skin of your teeth, you won't be able to make as many concessions. If it was a landslide victory, you'll be able to demand more from the losing side. And that's it for the hostile side of the diplomacy system. There's still a lot more to cover in the game, so stay tuned to learn even more.